Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. I think it's the first time I've ever talked to the retirees in 15 years being here at UMKC. And I'm a little bit different probably than some of the other speakers you've had, the other deans you've had, because they're relatively new. My vision, my strategy really hasn't changed much from day one. And so we're gonna hear a little bit about my personal story, a little bit about my research, because I had a great chance to go back and revisit it myself, which was good. And then we'll tell you a little bit about how the School of Computing Engineering grew and how that's going to transition into the School of Science and Engineering and why that was a good transition. So bear with me. There may be a few slides that I can say, maybe this isn't so important so that we can stay on time. But, so I hate to start all the way back to basically where I was born, but that's kind of part of the story. So I actually came from Seton, Illinois, which is a very small town in northern Illinois. Went to a high school of 400 total people, and at that time, we were still using slide rules, right? And it got covered up there. But then I went close to home and went to Monmouth College. And by the way, I didn't decide to go to college until 1 week before college started. I was going to go work for the phone company. I was going to make a lot of money. And so lo and behold, 40 years later, here I am with a PhD. Never thought that would happen or be in the academic world. So I actually got a Bachelor of Arts degrees in math and physics, and I had a minor in English literature, so I do appreciate the arts, right? Then I went to, you see the Lloyd's calculator there, all of 200, this need to be a little closer? Yeah. I'm very soft-spoken. So we actually ended up about that time of having calculators, and it was great to be able to take sines and cosines and tangents with an actual calculator. It was $200. It was like multiple months worth of pay, actually, for me to try to get that calculator. And then I went to Washington University in 1977, 78. Ted Columbus was a world-class structural engineer. He was my advisor. Phil Gould was a great mentor. And many of the ideas that I had from the School of Computing Engineering and for now the School of Science and Engineering came from Phil Gould, or some derivative of his thinking. So I set this up here just because I thought you'd get a good chuckle, right? Yes, I had an afro. Right? You see me up there in the front corner? There's 2 or 3 things on this picture that's really important. First of all, if you count or you look very closely, there's 3 women, and that's it, right? That's drastically changed today, and we continue to work on that. Second thing is my picture's just hilarious. And the third thing is that look at all those wide ties. They're kind of like clown ties. Right? And back then, TI came out and HP came out with their calculators, and I was a TI guy, so I ended up with this TI 56, and that was about $600 or $700. That was really expensive. And then they came out with the 59. My God, the 59 had magnetic readers on their calculator, right? I still have those today. And that was unbelievably important. So it's interesting though, because as I was going through my degree program at Washington University, I was once again ready to go take a job at Monsanto, of all places. And Phil Gould, my mentor, came to me and says, Kevin, we really think you should just stay in academics and be a faculty member. And I said, well, I don't have a PhD, there's no way I can do this. He goes, that's all right, we're gonna pay for you to go to Enrollment, get your PhD, as long as you consider us as your first choice when you graduate. And that basically changed my entire trajectory. So, could have been at Monsanto, could have been an engineer for them, but in reality, then I became an academic. So I went to Rolla, and I worked with Frank Chang. You may know him. He's a curator's professor, well respected. But we were working on key punch and cards back then, right? So this is kind of a historical thing for you. While I was going to Rolla, I was actually still teaching at Washington University. So I was commuting 3 days a week to Rolla. It was an hour and 45 minutes. 7:30 a.m. graduate classes. So leaving St. Louis at about 4:30 or so. And then on Tuesday, Thursdays, I taught classes, and the rest of the time I was doing research, trying to finish up the PhD. And my area of expertise at that time was seismic optimization and optimal design of 3D structural systems subject to seismic excitation. Our biggest obstacle then was compute power, and so that whole idea of showing you how we went from slide rules all the way up to key punch cards and now to actually dumb terminals is all part of the pathway, because not only did I become a structural engineer, I actually became an expert in high performance computing, right? And so this leads you to kind of where I am today with School of Science and Engineering. Everything is multidisciplinary in STEM fields. You can't separate one from the other. In my case, I was a leading edge supercomputer user. Now, for those of you that remember the dumb terminals, I saw a bunch of people shaking their heads and kind of laughing about it. Wasn't it a major breakthrough when we were able to go from the screen that had green letters to orange letters? My God, green to orange. You had a choice. Yeah, let's see, say it is that. Because we thought that was pretty damn cool, right? So, on optimal seismic design actually led into a whole variety of other things. And again, this goes back to being multidisciplinary. In the STEM field, you can't be isolated. So I've actually done biomedical prosthetics, prosthetic cheekbones, prosthetic bones for your arms, joints, all kinds of things. I've done massive concrete structures. So that's going from prosthetic cheekbones to essentially the Hoover Dam, right? That's a pretty wide spectrum. I became an expert in floor vibrations. You've all been in buildings where it feels a little uncomfortable, structural steel connections. And then somewhere along the way, I was hired to look at a railing failure. I became this railing expert that I couldn't get out of for years and years and years. Everyone wanted me. Just so you know, I'm 37-0 in the courtroom. And so it was pretty good. Now I chose my cases very carefully, right? So. And then I became an expert for NSF on international experiences in education, which is part of why I like the international things that I do today. Yes, hockey was big for me. That was my respite. And Bob Pipo's here, and we're both big hockey fans. And what people don't understand was when you walk into an ice rink and you shut that door, you can just let everything else go. And the other good thing is the parents are on the other side of the glass. Right? You're on this side with the kids, and they're over there. So I coached about 35 different teams, and I ended up becoming Missouri president of Missouri Hockey for the youth division. I was director of coaches, and yeah, it says 5,000, but it was more like 6,500. But that training had very little to do with hockey. It had everything to do with how do you coach kids? How do you actually get them to become functioning human beings, quite honestly? Because no one, or very few, are going to get up on their boss's desk and get a slap shot or do some kind of ice maneuver, right? And so it's all about shaking hands, looking people in the eye, and having conversations. And that was the part that we talked about. So my daughter's in the upper picture. I won't point her out to you. She actually became a world-class ice dancer. So I spent a lot of time in ice rinks, right? And my son's the lower one, and he now has 3 hockey training centers in St. Louis. So I did become an off-ice official, which is somewhat unusual. I've had hundreds and hundreds of $1 million players spit on my shoes because you're sitting there and they're just they're drooling and they got the water bottles, right? So, but I was there. And I did that for 10 years. I'll be honest, that was one of the hardest things to give up in St. Louis to come to Kansas. It was very difficult. I would go to 42 games a year and sit with these people in the box. I had a crew of 25 people that I actually did. That was in addition to being an academic, right? So we're back to earthquake engineering. I like these slides just because I think they're somewhat entertaining for people to see. So in the US, earthquake engineering really came to focus in 1971 with the San Fernando earthquake. And let's see if I can, I can't do any kind of pointer because I got 3 screens. But if you take a look at that building that is on your left, that is Allview Hospital. And that is the, on the right-hand side, leaning over on its side, that is the elevator, okay? So the elevator just detached from the building and fell down. In the front, you see it was what's called a pendulum roof. It has fallen on all of the ambulances and they couldn't go out to rescue people. So the hospital was dysfunctional. They couldn't get the emergency vehicles out. And that kind of sparked the US government to start investing in seismic research, which is kind of where my passion became. And you can see the bridges on the right. There's a variety of different ways I can tell you how that happened, but we're not going to do that today. So what you might be interested in, people don't realize, if you want to put this in perspective, on energy, earthquake energy. So you can see the 1960 Chile earthquake or the 1964 Alaska earthquake or the New Madrid 1812. are all above the world's largest nuclear test, Mount St. Helens and Krakatoa, right? So in terms of energy release, which is in explosive pounds of explosive, these are at the top of the heap. Now there's a lot of things that go into seismic events: magnitude, distance, and local soil conditions. Magnitude is exponential. So when it goes from a 5 to 6, it's not just a linear thing, it's an exponential thing, right? Same thing for 7, 8, 9. So distance is how far you are away, but it's more than that, and it's also local soils, and I'll tell you a little bit about this. So you probably know the Ring of Fire, sometimes called the Rim of Fire. Those would be earthquakes that come from plate tectonics, plates moving one relative to the other. If you're sitting in St. Louis or in our area, it's not. It's a mid-plate event, and it's a shearing of the soils in that mid-plane. It's still displacement of soils and the release of energy, but they're typically deeper. And the difference is when you're in California and have an earthquake, the Rocky Mountains basically stop the waves from going to Arizona. When you have this in New Madrid, they basically rang church bells in Minnesota, okay, that event. So they're very, very different. And then you get to something like Mexico City. Mexico City, if you were to look at an aerial view, you can clearly see where the damage took place in 1985 because it all took place in what used to be an old lake that was filled in with silt and alluvial soils. Everything outside it, so it would be like taking a big sheet of brownies, cutting a hole in it and putting jello, right? And those buildings were sitting on the jello, and everything that wasn't sitting on the jello survived, all right? And it amplified those things. There were 4 major types of collapses in Mexico City, and you can kind of see it. I have an example of each one on the right-hand side. A top floor failure, that mid failure on that second one over, you can see that came from pounding on the building next to it. Right? You can just see the corner of that building there, and how they line up. The third one is a first floor collapse, and the other one is a full failure. By the way, the full failure was a hospital. Right? So that was 1985, so that was right when I was finishing my dissertation. Right? And I actually went on a field trip to look at the damage. When you have an earthquake event, sometimes things are pretty obvious, right? It's going to be a tough train ride down those tracks, right? And that other is actually a column for a very specific type of equipment that you wouldn't want that to happen. So throughout my career, I was pretty lucky. The Corps of Engineers found out that I was a seismic expert, and this is Lock and Dam 26 right next to St. Louis. And I was responsible for designing essentially most of the things for the seismic components, which led them to a career of writing almost all of their design codes. So if something happens to one of these hydraulic structures in the US, don't look at me. It started there probably. But to give you an idea, see that those metal gates there, those are 90 feet tall. Those are 9-story building tall metal gates that open and close. One of my favorite stories is not this lock, but one of the older locks. I get a call one day and he said, "Kevin, we're missing one of our miter gates." One of them had dislodged and floated down the Mississippi River, underwater. It's not on top. We had to go looking for it. It's about 3 miles downstream. And that was quite the challenge. And another day, they called me up and said, "Hey, we just uncovered this gate and it has 55 fractures in it." I'm like, "Oh, we better take a look at that." So sometimes the things are not obvious. This is actually another portion of the lock and dam called Charleroi lock. And what you see there is all of that maroon that's right at the top of those circles. That is where that member could possibly shear across that interface. It would be like perforations, right, in something. And so it's not always obvious. By the way, to do that analysis takes 7 days on the supercomputer at that time. Only one job, just that job. Interesting. So, I only show you this arch dam layout for a couple reasons here. So this is an arch dam. This is actually the Hoover Dam, but we worked on several other around the world. And we're not going to build dams in the U.S., just so you know, any longer. It's just Backing up a canyon with water just doesn't sit well with the US population, right? But in this case, we actually computerized what used to take 4 months of personal labor to lay out an arch dam, a new arch dam, and we can do it in 5 minutes. And so back to the supercomputer mentality and the software development mentality. By the way, most people think arch dams aren't built in layers, horizontal layers going up. They're actually built in segments like an orange. So that's why those look like that in that bottom left corner. But what we did also was we computerized or automated the idea of looking at cooling coils. Why are cooling coils important? These are massively large concrete systems, and when concrete hydrates, it gets hot. And so we had to build a radiator system to take this out. Not only that, though, because this is done in segments, you use that radiation to cool down each of these segments so they shrink, and they get a gap between each one. You fill it with grout, and you let it expand, and that's why it doesn't leak. Right? Most people don't know that, but that's it. All right. So enough about me, enough about my research, but sometimes that's kind of fun, at least for me. And so why UMKC in Kansas City? Here I am, I'm at Washington University. I've been there either as a student or instructor, faculty member for 30 years, right? Very affluent, high research, private institution. I used to tell my faculty these students are coming from very affluent families. They probably don't have to have a job. They probably came from private high schools. Don't screw them up, right? That was it, that was my life, don't screw them up, okay? So I was making what I thought were small changes over long periods of time. You know, they had a huge endowment, and the expectations were kind of standard. So I came and interviewed at the University of Missouri, Kansas City in 2008. It took me 3 months to say yes, by the way. They kept asking, they kept calling me, are you coming? Are you coming? I kept hoping they'd call me and say, we're not gonna offer it to you any longer. But on a weak moment, I said, yes, I'll be there. And so I came in 2008, been here 15 years as the dean, thought I'd be here 2 or 3. Good or bad for UMKC, we'll have to still be told. But what I found out, and it took me a year or 2 to figure out, the first time college goers were just like I was. I came from a very small town, kind of first time college goer, and I started to see the value in what we were doing here at UMKC. I started to see that we had a purpose and an obligation to help Kansas City. And so, looking at this, I've come from a very high level research institution. I'm thinking, how do we get our research back in track, getting it to elevate? How do we go from an R2 to R1? So I was thinking about those things in 2008. I will say this, the thing that really screwed me up was the system. The 4-campus system, I didn't anticipate. Right? It was a little bit more challenging. But what I was looking to do was make large changes over short periods of time, and I think you're going to see that happened. So we'll go back to the School of Computing and Engineering when I first got here. When I first got here, we had 500 students. Just before the merger, we were at 2,500 students. When I first got here, we were negative net revenues, and now we're one of the highest net revenue on campus. When I got here, we had 1 million in research. We now actually have 78 million in research, ongoing research. We were raising about $20,000 per year, and now we're raising $6 million per year in donations. Tech transfer, we spun off iVerify, which was sold for over 100 million. So what we did is try to create value and high visibility inside and outside Kansas City. So I will tell you, when I first got here, SCE, the School of Computing and Engineering, not UMKC, but that school was not considered very highly by the STEM community. And so I would go to them and say, I'm not going to ask you for any money today, but 5 years from now, I'm coming back. And that's what we did. So I was asking for sciences and SCE to merge many, many years before it happened with a couple of the provosts, and they just couldn't see it. Terrifying, daunting, couldn't understand what that was going to do, thought it would destroy arts and sciences. I get all those things, I really do. But then COVID came, and UMKC Forward was born out of that. Those conversations were brought to the forefront. Chancellor Agrawal was looking for something new and innovative, and we I told them, said, you could not do this if you were any other institution, but you can do it as UMKC. And just so, I probably shouldn't say this if it's being recorded, but I will. MU tried to consolidate their engineering departments for the last couple of years and was unsuccessful. Too much resistance. So, you all saw this alignment before, and that's a little hard to read, but the main thing is the School of Science and Engineering, and that's not Science and Technology, but it should be the School of Science and Engineering, then took in the 6 sciences and a couple others. So we have math, physics, and biology, and chemistry, architecture, urban planning and design, and earth environmental sciences all merged with what was computing and engineering. It's a mega school. Somebody alluded to that already. It is a mega school. It is the largest school on campus. No doubt about it. It's about 1/3 of the campus if you start looking at the total numbers. We have these degrees and we're adding degrees. So 13 Bachelor of Science. There's also, I didn't even put the Bachelor of Arts on here. We have several of those, 17 Masters. PhDs are being reworked. We hope to add architecture as a full-fledged degree, not a 2-year program in the next year. We'll see how that goes. So why would you do this? Why was this important? Well, quite honestly, from a university standpoint, it's about increasing enrollments, increasing research, becoming more value to the community with outreach and visibility. And it was natural to take advantage of the successes we've had in SCE. It is not a takeover, it is clearly emergent. I want everyone to understand that. We value everything that's coming in the sciences. We just want to get them working alongside with us to move forward. So part of it is taking advantage of the SCE successes to help re-engage essentially the sciences in research. Part of it is to help them think about how they're going to increase their enrollments, right? But fundamentally, my premise was always that we want to solve world-class problems. You cannot solve a world-class problem as an individual. It takes a team, right? So we'll take a very simple piece. If you were trying to solve a biomedical problem, you have to have probably some medical people involved, you have to have some biologists involved, you might have to have some chemists involved, you might have to have, if it's sensor technology, electrical engineers involved, computer scientists might be doing AI. You cannot do these things alone when you're solving a world-class problem. Let's think about battery storage. Battery storage is a world-class problem right now. Once we get that solved, then electric vehicles make sense, and a lot of other things will make sense. We just aren't there yet. But you need a chemist, you need an electrical engineer, you need a material scientist, you probably need some kind of a sensor technology piece. So all of these things are going to make sense. So we're trying to connect these sciences and also to the workforce. What I found oftentimes when I would talk to the sciences faculty, where do your students get jobs? They would have a hard time telling me that sometimes. I don't have any problem in school of computing engineering, by the way. I know exactly where our kids go. So we're just going to work on that and try to find what kind of jobs and what kind of degrees are the sciences looking for today. It could be different, right? And a better use of resources. I was just telling Bob Simmons, I've taken 16 dumpsters of old equipment out of Flarsheim Hall since we merged, right? It was just stuff sitting there, and it was a poor use of space, it was a poor use of equipment and resources. So we are doing that, but it's not just space, it's equipment, it's finances, it's recruitment, it's marketing. We are looking at everything to make everyone more efficient. So we created 4 divisions. By the way, that wasn't simple, right? Everyone that had a department said, why can't we just bring our department? I said, well, there's a reason we're consolidating us, right, merging us. How's your enrollments doing? Well, they're not doing so well. How's your research? Well, we could be doing better. If I went to a national conference, would they know your name if I used it? Well, probably not. Okay, so well, that's 3 strikes. Let's think of this differently, right? And it's not anything against those departments or individuals, but this is a better way, and I'll tell you another reason why this is important to me. Biological and biomedical systems, computing, analytics, and mathematics, energy, materials, and systems, natural and built environments. We've gotten away from the old traditional ideas, and we've tried to consolidate these things. And you can kind of see they're all aligned. These are probably more aligned based on academics. What? Me, from my perspective as a dean, right? We need to energize, revitalize them. We need to think about today's STEM jobs. But more important, with 4 division directors, I could impact or impart change easier than 19 departments. Right? I know you know a little bit about university politics, right? So if I have 19 people reporting to me or 4, which would you like, right? And so with 4 people, I could actually sit down and talk with them and get back to the faculty and disseminate this information back to the faculty with one voice. If you have 19 and you have 1 dissenter, that voice won't be my voice. It won't be the voice of the school. Okay. So our vision is just to become a highly respected, valued regional, national, and international school of science and engineering with signature professional-based education. The external mission is pretty much the same, but you can see key words here like global workforce, research environments, and professional programs, leadership. And so those are really important. What's really important, it's hard for you to see, is the internal mission, but you see there's teaching, research, technology transfer is something you don't hear about in many of the other fields, but in the STEM fields, we need to be thinking about how do we develop products that are meaningful. And service is key. It's all, you can see all the lines, the things are underlined, excellence and lifelong learning, you can go right down those. I don't think it's terribly important. Where are we today? 3,500 to 3,600 students total. Most people don't realize we have 1,200, almost 1,300 graduate students inside our unit. We have 156 or 58 PhD students inside our unit. Research is at 78 million. All those agencies, NSF, NIH, DOD, DOE, Air Force, Navy, Army, Transportation, and on down the line. Outreach, we have the KC STEM Alliance. I'm going to tell you a little bit about those. I know we're running out of time, so I won't go much longer here. But fundraising, you saw that, and student organizations. This is, I throw this in just because I think you should see it. This was one of our 3D printing jobs that we did for an architectural firm in town. That is Churchill Downs. And we built this for them so they could show how they thought the renovations would enhance Churchill Downs. I don't know if they won that project, but we also did the Buffalo Bills new stadium for that same company, and they did win that one. And so now all the executives want us to build 6 of them, 1 for each executive. Yeah, they think it's easy. It's not. That is not easy. That took 7 printers 7 days. Right? So what are we trying to do with the new school? We're trying to grow our enrollments. And here's the good news and the bad news for me. We grew the enrollments in sciences. We worked so hard for the last year and a half to grow the sciences. We grew them, and engineering dropped. Right? Not much, just a handful. But you're just like, okay, we've invested all this time over here. Now we can cut above ours again. Increasing research is clearly essential. If the chancellor really wants to go from R2 to R1, we have to do that. And fundraising, to have extra resources so we can build things like the Plaster Center, improve the facilities in the biological and Spencer chemistry buildings. That can't be done. We've all learned that. We've been here long enough, right? That can't be done with operational funds. Just can't, right? So we are using a lot of the same ideas that we used to grow SCE, new degrees fine. So the BSMS, and I'm just trying to highlight a couple of these key things for you. On the BSMS program, inside the School of Computing Engineering, we several years ago said, if you get a 4-year degree from us, we will let you take the master's at undergraduate tuition rates. So we've now implemented that across the board for the sciences. Chemistry doubled their master's students in 1 year, right? So it's the thing about being creative. I'd rather do volume, right? I'd rather do volume than net revenue off of each individual. We have the Rockhurst Joint Engineering Program. I hope I can find ways that the sciences can get involved with Rockhurst. So we have 150 students that come from Rockhurst to take our engineering courses. We are working with 30 different liberal arts colleges to try to get them partnerships so they will send their students in. Once they realize maybe they don't want to be an educator in math or physics, if they want to be engineers, that just like me, 40 years ago, can come here and do that and be an engineer. We have a pre-engineering program at MCC. It's unique, it's different than the universities, because what we do is we let the students come and take 3 or 4 classes at MCC rates on our campus so they get acclimated to UMKC before they come, right? And we'll do that for the sciences. Plaster Center, we'll tell you just a couple things about it. International, this is a really big thing. Everyone wants to know, Kevin, why do you spend so much time on international? Well, if you've ever looked at the financials, that's the first thing you need to look at. But cultural diversity is also really important for us, right? And most of our first-time college goers have not left Kansas and Missouri, let alone China or Spain or wherever the case may be. So bringing those students to us is really, really important. That's a slide I actually use when I go international. Kansas City's 2.3 million people. It's number 2 for the highest paying jobs and low cost of living. Yeah, most people don't know that. So your differential income is incredibly large, right? And then you're number 1 for engineers and computer scientists per capita in the entire nation. Most people don't know that. Now, I think the science is weaved in there somehow. And from our offices, you can be in $20 to $25 billion companies, STEM companies, in 15 minutes. So you kind of see how the enrollments have gone. SEE was going up and down. COVID kind of threw a kink into that. Research, we have over 70 different specialty areas of research. I'm not going to take you through all of these things. Maybe you'll find something up there you like. But the sciences now have added to that list in things like precision medicine, climate change, genomics. Those weren't on our radar before. So we now have probably 15 or 20 science areas that we didn't have before. Research, this is the SEE research. Notice how it was plateaued and then it took off, okay? Everyone thought enrollment growth for SEE had to do with tuition dollars. Yes, that's true. But what we had to do was hire good young researchers to jumpstart the research mission. So that's how that research took off so fast. It takes them 4 or 5 years to get in the pipeline, and then it goes. Right? So research expenditures, this is for the campus. This is not just for us, right? Actually, that number 53 is about 90 for this year. So this is to tell you how close we're getting to R2 to R1. Those bars there show you science and engineering's impact on the research versus non-science and engineering. And this is nothing against the non-science and engineering, it's just who we are, right? And so it's so critical that the sciences get engaged if we are going to go to R1. The sciences have to get engaged. That's how close we are from going to R2 to R1, right? All we have to do is cross that line, and by the way, the new numbers would put us almost on that line, so we're in good shape. Outreach International, the School of Science and Engineering has 30 partners around the world. The KC STEM Alliance, which is our K-12 outreach program, before COVID reached 97,000 K-12 kids in the community. Now, because of COVID, we're at 79,000. We'll get back to 100,000 very quickly. So this is Project Lead the Way courses. This is First Robotics. This is First Tech Challenge. This is Lego League Robotics. That's an incredible number. We're at 87 or 88% of all the schools in Kansas City. We just created a Math Academy. Why would I do that? It turns out that one year I turned down a large number of African American students coming out of Kansas City public high schools because their math scores were not good enough. And we have a motto inside our school: we're a pump and not a filter. The old engineering schools were filters. We're about taking in people and making sure they go out the top at light speed, right? You can't do it without math. So we now have hired a whole cohort of math instructors just for high school that are infused into the Kansas City public high schools to teach math because they can't keep good math instructors. So we'll add the stability and sustainability for that to happen, right? Alumni and development, model like this, hopefully a second building. That's the plans are in my head. I know where it's going to go. Chancellor's kind of on board, pretty much on board. So hang on, right? And this will be a case where we have to reach out to the sciences along with businesses and get them engaged now to be part of this. Visibility is key. I still think UMKC sometimes isn't seen as the institution that we really are in this community. I think we have to get out there, we have to be visible, we have to do things like the KC STEM Alliance, the Math Academy. We have to have workforce that goes out and goes to work. Last year was an incredible year. We actually had Meg McAllister, EPA Region 7 director. in our offices. We have Robin Carnahan from the GSA. If you don't know, the GSA administrator is in charge of every government facility in the entire United States. So that's substantial. We also had Pete. Pete stopped by. I'm just going to call him Pete because his last name's tough for me. Pete came by and took a little tour of the Placer Center and gave us a nice $10 million transportation center. So here, let's talk about that for a second. The difference again, multidisciplinary world-class problems command research dollars in the $1 million to $10 to $15 million range. Individual researchers, yes, you might get $1 million or $2 million, maybe if you're really, really good, right? And so one of the things that has increased our research, we just took in a $7 million contract a week ago, right? So when you're doing those kinds of things, you have this opportunity to make a huge impact on students, on our equipment, on our facilities, and on the community. Placer Center, just real quick, $40 million investment, $22 million in construction. We now have about $18 million in equipment. It's 4 floors. Its impact is increasing. We've had almost 9,000 visitors in 2.5 years. Talking about increasing visibility, everyone walks out of that building, thanks Bob, out of that building saying, we had no idea. We had no idea you existed. We had no idea you had this equipment. We had no idea you were doing this research. It's impressive. Ergo, building number 2, right? And you can see the things that are over there. By the way, for all of you, that facility is open to you to use. If you want to use the 3D printers or the fabrication equipment, the deductive material, just come see us. If you want to do all the research pieces, if we can train you, great. If not, we'll help you. But what is that for? It's about a collision of people and ideas. Community, faculty, researchers, students, industry. We have a company that really wants to come in and put their name on a laboratory and actually do business out of it. I'm like, I don't think we can do that. But it's really a try it before you buy it kind of place, right? So we're constantly getting the most up-to-date printers and equipment so that you can try it so you don't go buy it first. Multidisciplinary labs. Every lab in that building, it's not the old model where you have an individual faculty member's name on that laboratory. It is, here's the unmanned aerial vehicle laboratory, which has civil engineers, mechanical engineers, aerospace engineers, computer scientists, chemists, material scientists, all working in one laboratory. You go to renewable energy, you have heat transfer, you have mechanical engineers, you have fluid dynamicists, you have people from Earth Environmental Sciences working on climate, all in one laboratory. So this is not Dr. So-and-so's laboratory where they would go in, take their 5 students, stay there for 5 years, carry out a stack of papers, and say, look at what I did. Okay? This is about solving problems. We won't talk too much about this, but about 34,000 square feet of that building is dedicated to research. The clean room was anticipating biomedical engineering coming on board. It's very focused. Student teams, clearly this sells itself when parents and students come to see our facility. And thank you very much for listening to me. I'm happy to take any questions. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
I think it was a phenomenal presentation, as everybody in the room probably thinks. The one thing I would want to add is the significance of the humanities. A lot of people in the humanities think that all the money is going to your area and areas like that, but they don't understand just how significant the humanities are to people, learn how to write, how to talk, and that sort of thing, in order to convince people of things that need to be done. So just add that one point. I'm sure you're doing things like that.
And I will comment on that. That is absolutely true. And I'm a huge believer in breadth in the humanities. As I told you before, I had a minor in English literature. It's the thing that cut my sanity, quite honestly. Now, I will tell you this, though, Ray. I learned how to write while I was at Monmouth College, and I had to learn how to rewrite when I became a technical specialist, right? Because the prose and the flowery stuff didn't work so well, right? So I had to really work hard at that. Now, having said that, though, clearly, I think one of the things that universities are struggling with today, You know, when I went to college, it was, oh, just get a college education that's gonna set you up for success. No one cared where or what, right? And what we do find here at this institution, in particular with these first-time college goers, is the parents and the kids want to know what their job is gonna be the day they start the program, right? And that tends to make you tunnel this education, and they don't value the things that are outside that. Now you become a training facility. I think we want to be very, very careful not to be just a training facility. So, how do we do that? General education is still important. I'm not sure I think there's ways to make it more effective, more efficient than we have today, but that's just my opinion, right? So, I'm gonna go here first. Go ahead.
Okay, Jeff Dorsey.
Yeah.
Well,
I haven't seen you forever.
both a little different. Two questions. One is with respect to this beautiful broad program that you've set up. Internal quality control issues or programs or systems that you've set up for this to maintain quality of your product so that, you know, this is established and you have these principles in mind. The second is with respect to connections or collaborations on the medical side, which is something I was interested in. How, in that system of what you've got there, all the different departments, how is the interface and how are the problems being brought to you, or how do those problems come to you as your the capable labs are set up to deal with them?
So that's a great question. So let me just start off by saying, when we break down our research, 20 to 25% is with the health science campus, either medicine, dentistry, or pharmacy. And that was even before biology was part of us, right, in chemistry. About 25 to 30% of our work is with the Department of Defense. Okay, so when I say defense agencies, I should say, not necessarily Department of Defense. And then we have this other 30%, which is kind of amorphous in a lot of different areas. So what really happens, it was easy for computing and engineering, by the way, because what would happen is some surgeon or pharmacist that was working on some technology came to us because they needed a product, right? We're product builders, we're developers, right? And so they would bring those problems to us without us having to go look for them, right? Now that we have the sciences engaged, we're trying to figure out more ways for them to engage on the fundamental sciences that go along with those projects, right? And it is a bit of a challenge. We're relatively new. We're a year and a half into this. I almost know all the names of the faculty, almost, right? And so that is one of the things we are working on. How do we get them engaged in research that is multidisciplinary and get out of the silos of just individuality? Right? Now there are times, there's fundamental science that has to be done, and oftentimes that is done with a research team that's much more compact and isolated, right? So back to your idea of quality control, that goes back to the 4 division directors. I have a lot more influence over 4 people on how they are managing those, I call them pipes, right? They're kind of pipes for administration and education, but the research has to go this way, it has to go across those pipes with porous holes. But what I can do is I can hold them accountable, Steve. I can hold them accountable for, are you evaluating faculty and staff appropriately? Are you actually using your resources wisely? Let's go take a look at these laboratories. You're not using this one, let's repurpose it. You'll get it back if you start doing these things, right? And the policies, so Jeff, you'll appreciate this. I'm not a huge person on having written policies. I like flexibility. I like to have guidelines, right? I guess the old Pirates of the Caribbean, right? It's more of a guideline, right? And so we're still struggling with that a bit, because I will tell you, many of the sciences that came out of arts and sciences was very policy and rule oriented. And they want to, well, what's the policy for that? And I was like, yeah, it's kind of this. and they're struggling with that a bit. I'm struggling with it a bit, right? But the flexibility is what gives us that latitude to do things. Okay, so I'll give you my philosophy and policy, and it can be recorded because everyone's heard it here at the university. Is that there are only policies and guidelines are typically put in place for 2 reasons. One is that you are trying to constrain somebody, you don't trust them, that they're going to do the right thing, right? Or to make someone's job easier. Now that's all not, we still need that. We still need rules and regulations and some guidelines. But if you think about it, anytime someone comes to me as a dean and says, gee, we need a policy, I say, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to do? You're either trying to control somebody or you're trying to make somebody's job easier, right? So they can say no. It makes it possible for them to say no. So it's a delicate balance and a fine line. It worked well when it was just computing and engineering. A little bit of a struggle with arts and sciences right now. But that's a great question. We're struggling with P&T right now.
I guess this kind of goes along with what you just said, but what is your take on the AI debate? And are there computer ethicists as there are medical ethicists?
So AI, I've been in at least 4 meetings this week on AI and what we're going to do with AI. So here's my feeling on this, and I shared this with the provost yesterday. By the way, I'm not sure the chancellor's 100% on board with that. But I think it's going to become a tool, right? So, and I've taken cybersecurity and AI because those are both very hot topics right now. We will always have to be at the forefront of cybersecurity because there's always going to be someone else with a new idea on how to break you down, right? AI, I think, will become very much like Facebook or some app. Once we figure out that it's safe and it's doing the job we want it to do, we'll use it as a tool, right? Very different, so it becomes our new calculator, right? You went from slide rule to high performance computing. I think it's going to eventually be a tool. And then what that means from an educational standpoint is you have 2 options. You can be doing research in it, in AI, or you can be training people how to use AI, right? Now there are different platforms for AI, and that's where the researchers spend their time, efficiency, getting good information at light speed, those kinds of things, right? But for most of us, I think we're going to just say, is this producing a product I have confidence in? I'm going to use this one. And it's going to be used in medicine. Probably diagnostics could be a very good place. It's already being used in law to write contracts. We already use it in computer science to write code, simple code. So it's here to stay, and it's going to get better. There's a lot of consternation about what if somebody gives you bad data and you use the bad data, right? That's where we're at right now. Does that answer your question? Kind of.
It always gets down to the person who's deciding. And so in your program, is there some ethics and judgment training built into the application of the tool?
Absolutely, absolutely. Not so much in creating the tool, but in using the tool. So when is it appropriate to use that tool, when it's not appropriate to use that tool? There are a couple agencies right now that have said you cannot produce grants using AI. I don't know how they're monitoring that, quite honestly. So there's a lot of issues, but that's part of the AI training. It's about ethics, about data usage, and what's appropriate. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Say it.
You mentioned that you're trying to get top-notch researchers to come and work in the school. Great idea, and I can see the benefits of that thinking, the grants that you talked about, amazing. And you also mentioned that it takes then about 4 to 5 years to get set up and really start getting the dollars. Now, the same time frame, about 5-6 years, is critical for a new faculty because he or she is up for review, promotion, and tenure. And so, again, I hope the criteria has changed because we always go research, teaching, and service model. So if that person has been very successful in getting the grants, but not very effective in other things, how you are taking care of that? It's a delicate line.
I'm biased. I'm biased because I came from Washington University. If you had good research grants, they wouldn't care if you published one paper, right? And there's a balance. There's clearly a balance there, but it was that skewed. And teaching wasn't that important either. It was really about research dollars. Now, I don't think we're at that point here. okay? I think we have a balance of those things. But at the same time, if you're trying to become an R1 institution, you have to have researchers that are gonna be sustainable. So what I look for in a young person is someone who has probably multiple grants. I don't really care how large they are, but they know how to feather those together, and they're helping pay for their own graduate students and their own equipment, because otherwise it's a drain on the operations, right? If you think about a researcher, they should be an entrepreneur. A really good researcher will have a great idea. They'll go sell it to a funding agency, which is like a venture capitalist. They will go hire graduate students and postdocs. They will produce the product. And if they're really good, they'll have the second product already in the pipeline, right? So when I look for someone that's going to get tenure, so everyone in the room, just so you know, as a dean, tenure is a 30-year, multi-million-dollar commitment, and a line that you cannot get back. So as painful as it is, it can't be based on personality. It's got to be based on performance, number one. Number two, I'm looking for someone that has passion. If they constantly ask me if I'm going to get over the bar for tenure, I don't want those people. I want the people that soar over the bar at 100 miles an hour with a good clearance. And I know in 10 years they're going to taper off, something's going to change, but they also have to have a passion that you know that if something goes south, let's say AI is no longer a great field to be doing research in, they better be able to do it, right? So I'm looking for people that can talk in a broader sense about research and what they want to do. But you have to be this entrepreneur and if you own your own destiny, you're much better off than coming to the dean and begging for money, right? So you're much better off having your research dollars in hand and say, okay, I can go hire 3 graduate students, I can go do this. And by the way, if you do that, the dean will help you, right? Now you go ask for the 4th graduate student, I'll say, sure, right? Because the investment's good. But a 30-year commitment, 30-year multi-million-dollar commitment is what you're doing every time you give somebody tenure at a university. Because it doesn't change. Once they're in, they're in, right? And so I learned that lesson pretty clearly. At Washington University, it was interesting. The deans had to go before the board of trustees and make a case for every tenure case. Yeah, very different. Yeah, I think it's time, but I'm happy to stick around if somebody wants to. One burning question.
Yeah, so I do have a question that I don't know a whole lot about the Department of Engineering and Science because I work with the Division of Student Affairs, but I just wanted to tell you from your presentation, I think you should be so proud of yourself.
I'm proud of one last comment on that. I was very fortunate. I hate to it's going to sound kind of silly. Jane and I were running the school when I got here. It was Jane Bogle and me. And so I had the opportunity to go and hire some really incredible staff. And I'm a firm believer that I hire people to do their jobs. If I have to do their jobs for them, then I don't need them. And so I hire experts in those areas. I don't know a thing about enrollment management and recruitment, but I have a team that does, right? And so if you rely on those people, and you give them the authority to make good decisions, and you trust them and don't build a policy that constrains them, and they continue to be creative and daring thinkers, which is, if you look back, is in one of my statements. I want my staff and faculty to be daring, innovative thinkers that think creatively. Those ideas of going to Rockhurst, you should have seen the provost when I said, oh, I'm going to have a joint engineering program with Rockhurst. I thought at the time Gail Hackett was going to have a coronary. Okay? And now we've had 100 students per year in Rockhurst for 10 or 12 years. And it's not about the revenue, it's about the relationship. I can go sell, all I have to do is go to one of these Catholic families that has money and say, oh, we have this program for Rockhurst. And they're like, whoa, could I help you with some scholarships? Could I help